What's up, guys? Welcome back to the LTL Podcast. I'm here with Steve.
Hello.
And this week we're just going to be talking about some kind of early season trends. Obviously, like I said, kind of take a lot of this with a grain of salt. We're only like 5 or 6 games into the season, but I think it's worth talking about some of this stuff just to kind of see what's been going on in the NHL. And I guess before we start talking about teams, we'll start off by talking about a player who has kind of made some media headlines lately. Erik Karlsson was asked about his abilities as a player, and he went on record and he stated that he still thinks he's one of the best, one of the top players in the National Hockey League. And I'm not disparaging him for being confident. You kind of have to be. You can't just walk around with a pineapple on your head saying that you're like the worst person who's ever laced up a pair of skates. But I just kind of want to talk about that for a little bit, because when he went to San Jose, he was, arguably he was like one of the top 3 defensemen in the NHL, and he probably wasn't number 3. He was probably 1 or 2.
Yeah, easily.
And since he's gone to San Jose, he had a 45-point campaign, a 40-point campaign, a 22-point campaign last year. Currently has 6 points in 4 games. I think the thing that people are really kind of looking at more so than his points, because his points have always, a 45-point campaign is not bad. I mean, it's not Erik Karlsson that we were used to in Ottawa putting up 82 points, but I think it's really the goals that people are concerned about. Only 3 goals, 6 goals, 8 goals, as opposed to Ottawa, where he's putting up 13, 19, 20, 21, 16, 17. He hasn't broken the 10-point goal margin since 2017. So I guess give me your initial reaction to Erik Karlsson stating that he's one of the top defensemen in the league, and kind of we'll just go off of that.
I mean, he's wrong. He can think that about himself all he wants, but he's wrong. I don't know how you could say you're one of the best when you have 2 Norris trophies to your name and you haven't even gotten close to the form you were back then. I still think Erik Karlsson's an above-average defenseman. I mean, his offensive numbers are okay, and he's decent in his own end, but I wouldn't put him in my top 10 now, or probably for the last couple of years since that ankle injury.
Yeah. His defensive numbers, I don't like plus minus really a lot as a defensive number, but just to throw it out there, he is negative 61 on his career. A lot of that comes from Ottawa, but he's been negative for 2 out of his 3 seasons in San Jose. When he gamed there his first year, 2018-19, he was plus 6. Then he was a minus 15. Last year he was a minus 18. This year he's currently a plus 2. So overall with the San Jose Sharks, he's a minus 31. Again, a lot of that has to do with just the fact that the Sharks themselves as a team aren't very good, more so than Erik Karlsson. But I think that there was something to be said for the amount of speed in his game he lost from that. I mean, basically having to replace his entire right leg.
Yeah.
At one point, the ACL injury from the Matt Cook stomp certainly didn't help either. But I guess my question is, if he's not putting up the Erik Karlsson offensive numbers that we know he's capable of doing, and I mean, I don't really consider him anything more than just average in his own end, can we really, I mean, I don't think we can really consider him one of the top defensemen at all, but is there any argument to be made for that at all? I mean, I don't really think so myself.
I don't think so. I mean, you could probably argue that he's a better hockey player now than he was when he was younger, because he has to actually play the game instead of just using his skating to his advantage, but I don't think that would make him one of the best defensemen in the league.
I don't think he can compete with the likes of, this isn't really forethought, but just rattling off the top of my head, if I had to pick the top 5 defensemen in the league right now, in no particular order, it's probably Victor Hedman. I would say, and feel free to chime in, I think you can start to make an argument for Adam Fox at this point. I would probably put him towards bottom, maybe top 10, just because of the youth of his career. But I mean, you could make an argument for him. I think Roman Yossi makes a strong argument. I just don't think he stacks up to the likes of these guys. Jacob Slavin, you could argue just because of, his defensive numbers, Dougie Hamilton, Seth Jones, Zach Werenski. I don't really think he stacks up to these guys at all, honestly. I don't really know if Erik Karlsson would even crack the top 10 in the NHL at this point.
I really don't think he would, honestly.
I'm not sitting here just crapping on Erik Karlsson because, look, when he was at his peak, he was must-watch TV. Honestly. You would turn on Ottawa Senator games just to watch him play. But
He's just not the same player anymore.
And here's an interesting question for you. Do you think, obviously confidence is always a good thing in the NHL, but do you think that this mindset in particular is a good one for him to have?
I don't know. If it works for him, that's great and all, but I don't think I'd ever encourage one of my players to have the mentality of adopting the I am the best, there's something to be said for wanting to do your best or saying I'm playing the best hockey I can. But when you start saying things and making comparisons to outside of yourself and other players, I think it's a little foolish, honestly. Especially if you're Erik Karlsson and you're just gonna get clowned on by everybody. It's not like this is Roman Josi saying I'm, one of the best defenders in the league, and everyone's well, there's an argument, and then this is just Erik Karlsson still thinking it's 2013.
I gotta be honest with you. I think confidence is very important, but I don't like this mindset of coming out with a statement like this, if nothing else, because it attracts attention that you probably don't want. I tuned into a San Jose Shark game the other night, and they brought it up, on the broadcast. They were like, well, Erik Karlsson, years out on the ice, had those comments the other day. He's starting to make some rounds in the media. And I think in general, you really don't want to be making rounds in the media for that reason. It's weird. In hockey, you want to be in the media for stuff you do on the ice in a positive light way more often than stuff you say. Connor McDavid's always in the media, not because he says anything, but because he does magic on the ice every single time he touches the puck. Whereas it's
Right.
Erik Karlsson's in the media because he said some stuff and now everyone is talking about it. And sure, this is really the first time anyone's really talked about Erik Karlsson in this way in the last 3 years, so maybe he feels good about that. But do you really want that kind of tension? Because now everything's under a microscope. Every play, every turnover, every mistake.
I also as a player, do you want to invite that kind of scrutiny on yourself? Because now you're just inviting all sorts of fucking comparisons and, I guess just comparisons to yourself, the other players, and essentially the older version of you. Erik Karlsson is always going to be compared compared to the 21-year-old Erik Karlsson who scored almost 100 points.
Right.
So I think Erik should be adopting a different mindset. I just don't think he should be wanting to or caring if he's even in considered the best or among the best. I think he should just be looking to do the best he can with what he's given, because for what it's worth, he has had to change the entire way he plays the game, and he's not bad. He's just on a bad team. I still think he's a very serviceable top 4 defenseman with number 1 power play time. I feel he still gets you 50 points.
Yeah.
It's just not worth comparing yourself to guys, because then you're going to get compared to guys like what you said, Victor Hedman, Cale Makar, Adam Fox, Roman Josi. It's just, you open up a comparison to all the, and also best is such an awful way to do things. That's not quantifiable. It's it's so esoteric and ridiculous that it's just what do you mean you're one of the best hockey, best defensemen in the league? What do you do that's better than anybody else? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's you don't defend better than anybody else. Your offense certainly isn't up to the caliber of guys like Cale Makar, Adam Fox, Quinn Hughes. the guy that just signed in Jersey, Dougie Hamilton. Like clearly you're paling in that respect. So that's that's pretty much 2 out of the 3. And then so what are you left with? Like fundamentals and skills. All right, Eric, you might be the best at fundies in the league, but like doesn't really matter because like the biggest plug on the ice can be the best at fundies. Like who cares?
And I gotta think the Sharks are a little bit PO'd as an organization at this comment, considering that all of the controversy surrounding Evander Kane, and he's been suspended by the NHL 21 games, which, by the way, we should just get this guy out of the league. I personally think he should be banned from ever playing in the NHL ever again. And for those of you that don't know, what he did was he forged a vaccination card, which on its face you might, especially if you're one of these like red-pilled, listeners, you might be like, oh, there's nothing wrong with that vaccine. Listen, every guy in that San Jose Shark room that interacted with him, that hung out with him, that ate dinner with him, maybe they, hung out in a hotel room with him, was under the impression that he was vaccinated. So what he was doing was exposing every single one of his teammates, and then not only that, exposing every single one of his teammates' families to this thing potentially, because he's an idiot, which nobody else talked about that, by the way. Like, imagine you're hanging out with Evander because you think he's vaccinated, you think it's safe, you go home, and you pass COVID on to your kid because you're unknowingly carrying it because this idiot forged a vaccination card. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just so stupid and dangerous that I think he should be thrown out of the NHL entirely on top of the other stuff he's done. But
yeah, well, it's exactly it. Like, in conjunction with, like, the gambling and, like, everything else, it's just, like,
yeah, like,
he's such a negative, like, millstone around the league's neck. Like, if the league wants any sort of respectability in professional sports, you realistically shouldn't be letting guys who might as well be convicted felons continue to play in the league, unless you're the NFL. But
but you don't want that reputation. You don't want
right.
the NFL reputation.
Right, because like the NFL is a joke. Everybody makes fun of them for that very reason. They're like, oh yeah, Ray Rice, like he just goes to town on his wife in an elevator, and then he's playing football, and like 6 weeks later, like who cares?
Yeah, it's the National Felons League for a reason.
Yeah, and like the NHL just doesn't need that. Not that the NHL wants a squeaky clean reputation. Like all sports are gonna have quote unquote bad boys or people that have like a negative image associated with them in the sport. I mean, look at basketball. You have guys like Dennis Rodman, whose like whole image was associated with being like the bad boy, but he never did anything that was overtly damaging to the league. I mean, did he get his face pierced a bunch and like get some tattoos and like start dating Carmen Electra? Yeah, it kind of went to his head, but he wasn't like Evander Kane out here who's like forging government documents, because that's a felony what he did. Then gambling money and then losing it all, then being held for what was it, like he ended up going to court over like however much hundreds of thousands of dollars with fucking Caesar's Palace or whatever. It's just like, bro, he's clearly just such a drag on the league. He has to go. Not to mention,
he's a drag on your team because they had to pay all the money because San Jose paid off some of his debts. So,
and like, honestly, I would, if I was the legal counsel to the league, I would be looking for every loophole I could to like get him in breach of his I mean, honestly, he could be in breach of his contract. So like, San Jose could maybe find a loophole to get him off the books, right? Because if he goes into breach of his contract and then they are able to terminate it, I think they'll be on the hook for some of the cap, but not all of it. And he's gone. And then, so then even if the league doesn't officially suspend him forever, I mean, like he's so toxic and such a damaged goods. Like, I feel like that would just be enough. He just wouldn't come back, Maybe like the Colin Kaepernick situation, but like instead of like what happened to him, this would be like justified.
I definitely think to a certain extent that there's probably a way to get him on breach of contract, specifically in regards to the COVID documentation, because
I was thinking the gambling too, because I'm pretty sure like there's explicit rules in the NHL about gambling at all. Even because you can't, I know you can't gamble on your own games, obviously, like that's like rule number one. But I'm pretty sure the NHL won't let you gamble on any league games at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but he did gamble on Shark games. We know that, so.
Well, that's like breach of contract 101 right there, right? Like he broke. You know what's crazy to me too, though? I don't know. We're going on a little bit of a rant here, but
go ahead.
How if you're the NHLPA, right? How can you defend a guy like this? Like we've talked about how could they sleep at night defending Tom Wilson, which was like a different issue, right? Like Tom Wilson's a menace to like the ice. Like he's he's a menace to society in a contained sense. Like he's a menace to our society, like our little insular community of hockey, right?
Right.
Whereas like Evander Kane is clearly a menace to society at large. Like he's doing damage to himself and his family and the San Jose Sharks organization, like financially. He's doing, untold, I mean, the emotional and like I guess human toll he's taken by like lying to his teammates and like forging documents and doing all that shit is like untold. So like the guy is just and doesn't he have like domestic violence allegations too, or wasn't that something that came out about him a couple months back? Like
Um,
after the gambling thing? I
I
might be wrong, but I just remember there was like a whirlwind of things about Evander Kane, and I thought that was one of them. So
I
let's verify, because I don't want to.
think it was something to do with, um,
It
he
was
was domestic violence allegations. He received a temporary restraining order against his wife. Um, Kane claimed that she abused him, and then she claimed he abused her. Um, Apparently, the NHL has cleared Kane of the gambling allegations, which I don't understand how he got cleared of that, but he did. Um,
Because the
yeah,
NHL at some point was just doing damage control, I think. I think they were just trying to downplay it as much as possible, right? Just like make it blow over. But I mean, honestly, if anything, this is a missed opportunity for the NHL. Because like, there have been times in the past with the NHL, like people have been caught gambling in the NHL, like doing things like this, and the hammers come down kind of unjustified. It's like this is the one time the NHL has all the power to bring the ban hammer down and like really flex its muscles and really not have to worry about a lot of pushback from the NHL Players Association, because like how are they going to defend this guy? So like, and they just missed. I feel like it's just a big missed opportunity for the league to really like show that it's not playing when it comes to like previously established rules like gambling, but also it's not playing with like newly established rules like the COVID thing. Like it's like, no, we are not taking this lightly. This is serious. And if you're going to treat us like a joke, then like you're not going to allowed to be here, you know? Like any other job, if somebody would have done that, they would have gotten fired on the spot.
oh, absolutely.
Like if I showed up to my job and had a fake card and all that shit, like I would have been fired and like I would have been fired before I could walk out of the personnel office, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just like I don't know how he's getting away with it, but
And here's the thing, too, right? If you want to be a complete idiot, essentially, and just look at Evander Kane as a hockey player and just be like, well, I don't, be one of these morons that says, well, I don't care what he does off the rink as long as he's good on the rink. Okay, yeah, he's a 20 goal scorer. Is a 20 to 25 goal scorer. He put up 26 goals, 22 goals last year, 26 goals the year before, 30 goals the year before. Is a 25 to 30 goal scorer worth any of this trouble at all on the ice? Especially when he's been banned for 21 games, so he's not even playing? No. So you can't even make that argument about, there are very few players that this much legal trouble would be worth, and Evander Kane is quite certainly absolutely not one of them.
honestly, the only players that would be worth this much legal trouble would have to be like it'd have to be like Connor McDavid, bro. Like I
Connor
don't think I'd be able,
McDavid or like Crosby or Ovechkin, like that
yeah,
echelon
like
of hockey player.
the only I can't even think of. It's just so stupid, bro. Like I just don't get how Evander Kane like flushed his whole career down the toilet. Like he
I
had like everything is looking up for him, right? You saw him like that contract was worth like I think it was something like it was 7 years, and he's making $7 million.
seven by
Like
seven, so
yeah, it's like a fucking
$49
49
million
million
contract with signing
on
bonus
top
of
of
$12 million.
yeah, on top of whatever money he made from Buffalo before that. So like, it's not like, bro, you have everything's going right for you. Just like save your money. Like you want to live like a flashy lifestyle, go ahead. You're worth $49 million. Like I'm not gonna tell you what to do with your money, but at the same time, like you didn't have to be an asshole and put like your entire organization at jeopardy. Honestly, like I actually read something last year that said if he if he said he didn't want to play in the bubble, right? Like he didn't want to play at all because they gave everybody that choice last year. Um, he would have defaulted on his contract, his payments, because his contract would have been declared null for the year. So he took those loans with those hotels for the gambling on like based on his contract. Like he used his contract as collateral, like the guaranteed money of it. So if he would have decided not to play, like he said he was originally not going to before he decided to play, the San Jose Sharks would have been left holding the bag for his entire debt because the contract is essentially goes back to them, and they're the ones that would have been held accountable for it because he didn't have, like he couldn't. So like it's so whack that they could have been on like his entire organization could be on the hook for like hundreds of thousands of dollars in gambling debts just because he's an asshole.
Yeah, and just for those of you who are listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but what do you mean by playing in the bubble? Is last year players could opt out of the entire season?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
So if he would have opted out, then yeah. But I mean, yeah. Look, ultimately, the point is we both think Evander Kane's an idiot, and he put uncountless numbers of lives at risk with his stupidity. I don't think anybody on the San Jose Sharks wants to be anywhere near him. Quite honestly, if I was a teammate of his, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with him. I wouldn't interact with him outside of the rink, and quite honestly, I wouldn't want to. I can't imagine a guy like him is good for a locker room. I can't imagine a guy like him is worth having around. San Jose currently has suspended him without pay, which they're allowed to do because he violated the COVID protocols, which was set up at the beginning of the season. If you're unvaccinated and you get COVID, you are suspended without pay. You're not paid for the games you miss, so you're suspended for these 21 games, which I don't know how that's gonna affect his whole gambling money situation. So, yeah,
I mean, you might have to sell one of those, Lamborghinis he bought.
So ultimately, yes, I think we should suspend Evander Kane indefinitely from the NHL. If not hard suspension, like you said, a soft suspension, nullify his contract, and nobody signs the guy.
Yeah.
So
Like, it's just so stupid. Sorry.
no, you're I mean, it's a hot button issue. It's a hot topic right now. And to kind of go back all the way around, I can't imagine San Jose is very thrilled with Erik Karlsson's comments when they just finally got the spotlight off of them by suspending him for 21 games, and they're probably like, "Thank God, we're 4-0. We can finally play some hockey now." And then he has to go and say this, and it's like, God
Like,
damn it, can we just play hockey?
Yeah, it's not even like the spotlight thing, right? Like, I don't think San Jose would mind being in the spotlight if it was just like Erik Karlsson was like, "Hey, I'm playing." Like, let me just put it this way: if he phrased it in saying like, "Hey, I'm playing the best hockey I've played in a long time," right? And the team is better than I think a lot of people are giving us credit for, and that was like the things in the comments, and then they went out there and were 4-0. I don't think anybody would be like clowning on Erik Karlsson or the San Jose Sharks like they are right now, and they wouldn't have like this negative public perception. It would be like, "Oh, Eric's just pulling, he's doing his job. He's pulling the ship in the right direction." But here, coming out and saying something like it honestly comes off as really arrogant. Like, I'm still one of the best in the league. It's like, okay, that's just kind of a douchey thing to say, Eric. Like, honestly, do you think like, do you think a guy like Nick Lidstrom went out there every night telling himself, I'm the best player and I'm the best defenseman in the world right now? Like, no, he just went and did it because the best don't have to tell you that the best. They just prove it to you over and over and over again. And for a while, Eric did do that, but now, Eric's got to back that up, and he's playing well. But I still don't think he's going to be able to back up saying I'm one of the best in the league, unless he has like an amazing late career renaissance like Mark Giordano did. It's just like I just don't see it.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the real issue is going to come down to, like I said, Erik Karlsson was kind of in a place where the Sharks, I mean, look, it would be incredibly difficult to move his contract right now.
Isn't it like $11.5 million a year?
He's still got 6 years left, including this year, so technically 5 after this year, at $11.5 million with a no move clause. So that's an incredibly difficult. First of all, Erik Karlsson is willing to accept a trade, which if the Sharks are as bad as everyone thinks they're going to be, their 4-0 start notwithstanding, which I think will happen. I think they're going to come back down to earth. That's a very difficult contract to move, although I think Erik Karlsson would be willing to accept a trade to a competitive team, considering the fact that he's 31 years old and he's running out of time.
Yeah. I also want to point out that, like, everybody talked, like, people talk about hellish shit about that contract, like, specifically the Erik Karlsson one, but it's like, and the Drew Dowdy one, because they're essentially the same contract almost. And it's like, people forget that when Erik Karlsson signed that contract, he had not played a game for San Jose yet. He got traded to them and, like, immediately signed the contract. So they were signing, Norris Trophy, two-time Norris Trophy winner Erik Karlsson to that contract. They weren't signing Erik Karlsson, the Bionic Man, to that contract. So it's like, is it, was it dumb on their part? Probably, but I'm not gonna blame Erik for taking $11.5 million. Are you kidding me? He would have to have been stupid to say no. So, like, it's such a weird spot to be in, because, like, that contract, when it was signed, was actually such a good deal, and, like, made sense, that, like, watching it age like sour milk is just so strange.
I mean, certainly you can make the argument that by the time that contract was signed for the 2019 season, that there were indications that Erik was not exactly the same. A 3-goal, 45-point season in 53 games is not Erik Karlsson that we expected him to be.
No,
but at the
but
time, he was still considered, if maybe not top 3 at the time, certainly top 5.
And again, this is before, I mean, that 45-point campaign in 53 games isn't bad. Like, that's respectable for a defenseman, especially. You know what I mean? So I think they were probably looking at it like, oh, well, Erik was a little banged up. He obviously didn't play the whole season. So, it'll be fine. He'll return to form full season, and we'll get old school Erik back. And then he comes back. He's sort of kind of the same. Like, he actually was playing well for them on that first year. Then they get into the playoffs, and his ankle gets... Yes, yeah, in 2019 his ankle got blown apart, and then he was never the same.
Yeah, so, again, I'm not clowning on him for being confident. I'm clowning on him for espousing that confidence in public.
I'm clowning on him for being unrealistic, honestly.
That too.
That's really what it is. Like, it's just like, bro, just accept, like, don't live in a fake reality, bro. Like, it's just... Who cares if you're the best? Like, you're getting paid $11.5 million. You get to play a children's game for the rest of your life, and you're guaranteed this money no matter what. Even if your contract is bought out, you get this money. And I know he's a competitive guy. I know he wants to win a Stanley Cup after getting really close with the Ottawa Senators to being in the Stanley Cup final. But, like, at the end of the day, it's like, just don't worry about if you're the best or not, and just go out there and be a good teammate and a good leader and prove it, is really kind of my problem with it.
Yeah.
You never saw a guy like Mark Messier out there being like, "Oh, well, I'm the best." Like, he went out there and did it.
To your point, he didn't have to tell you that because you knew it.
Exactly. Like, and like, it's one thing if Erik Karlsson was like being like amazing still, right? And was putting up like 80 points and nobody was talking about it, and he was just frustrated like that. I could understand, but it's like, this is coming from a guy with almost no way to back it up, because he's severely underperformed for the last 3 seasons. But, it is what it is.
So,
Erik's being Erik.
It's definitely interesting. I think these are, interesting conversations to have, especially because it kind of starts to touch on, hockey culture in general about being humble. So, we'll see what happens to San Jose. They're 4-0. They're certainly doing better than a lot of other teams that we thought would do better.
I have an interesting topic, maybe.
Okay.
So, speaking of defensemen who, I guess, who are reaching like the end of their halcyon days, right? They're Drew Dowdy having a hell of a resurgence this year. Gets kneed and is out indefinitely. What do you got to say about it?
That was rough. I was watching that game. What Steve is referring to is in the Dallas Stars LA Kings game, which was last night, I believe.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we were in Discord while you were watching.
Drew Dowdy, having a pretty good season to this point. 6 points in 4 games. He's got a goal and he's got 7 points. Excuse me, a goal and 6 assists. He's a +2. He's only got 2 penalty minutes. It looks like he's starting to become the Drew Dowdy that we know. He's 31 years old. The LA Kings obviously this past offseason making an effort to get better now, bringing in guys like Philip Deneau, Victor Arvidsson, Alexander Edler, making a concentrated effort in order to get better now to kind of try to compete for these last few years with guys like Anze Kopitar, Dustin Brown. And yeah, Joni Hakanpää comes across, and it's a rough play. I mean, I don't think that there was intent on the part of Joni Hakanpää. I really don't, because Drew flipped the puck into the zone and Hakanpää was going to lay a hit, and Drew kind of made that move to the inside to kind of get around him. But all of that being said, what I will say is that Yoni's leg was pretty wide, and that's just something as a hockey player you just have to be aware of. I mean, you want to get wide and big when you're going to throw a hit, but you can't have your legs sticking out that far when, especially because I mean Joni Hakanpää doesn't really need to,
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna pull up his bio here because I'm pretty sure he's a big guy.
So I guess this is a question for you, since you're talking about hockey culture at large. I've noticed this over the last couple of years. My dad and I have had a couple of conversations about it in relation to hockey. And it's that, it's the old mentality of they take a hit to make a play. I feel like more so now you see guys try to get out of the way of big hits. And, I don't blame them. Listen, if I was an NHL player or, a ice hockey player at any level, I'm not trying to go out there and get blown off my fucking skates. I'm not trying to get blown up on the ice every time I go out there. But there's something to be said for, I've noticed that when guys tend to try to get out of the way of these hits, right, they either jump or they stretch in a weird way. I feel like the end results are always significantly worse than if they were just to take the hit and get stood up, right? Like if Drew Dowdy dumps that puck in, takes that hit, falls down, and he gets right back up, and and he can continue playing. I'm not blaming him, right? This isn't me trying to point fingers. It's just interesting to me that the mentality is you'll still hear players say that, take a hit to make a play, but then you see this happen, and I just almost wonder why players continue to try to do these things when we see these catastrophic results from what essentially are really unlucky accidents, 1 in a million shots of these things being as catastrophic as they are. And we saw Drew Dowdy go down with a hit like that. We've seen several injuries with guys of their knees because like you said, to Hakanpää's credit, he's coming in low and wide to make a hit, and Drew Dowdy tries to get out of the way. His skates, his legs can't really go anywhere. He can't try to pull that skate in. He can't do anything. So it's only going to end badly for everybody involved.
Yeah. Also, I just want to apologize real quick to Hakanpää. His first name is Yanni, not Yoni, so sorry for saying the name wrong. But, I mean, Hakanpää is 6'6", 220. Drew Dowdy's 6'1", 202. So there's not a big weight difference. And Hakanpää being as taller as he is than Drew Dowdy, he's probably less stacked, less built, essentially.
Yeah, he's not built like a brick shithouse, Dowdy's short and stocky.
19 pounds over 5 inches on him, which kind of spreads out to be not that big. I think it was just... And look, obviously the game of hockey is incredibly fast. These things happen quickly, but I think that maybe Drew should have just taken the hit, and because there was no way, it's not like Drew was flipping the puck around Hakanpää to then pick it up on the other side. He was flipping it in deep, so it's not like he was going after the puck at that point. And by making that little shimmy to the outside, that's when you end up with these kind of knee-on-knees that we see a lot. And look, I think 9 times out of 10 when we see a knee-on-knee collision, these guys aren't going out there to do that, because that's just as dangerous for Hakanpää as it is for Drew Dowdy. I mean,
well, yeah, exactly. I mean, because his feet are planted. He doesn't stick his leg out or anything. It's not like when you see a guy actually clip somebody where he sticks his leg out and leans in and hits him. Hakanpää's knees, he's lucky his knee didn't buckle or do something real awful because his skates were dug into the ice. He could have just gotten just as hurt as Drew Dowdy.
Yeah, and you just don't. 9 times out of 10, a lot of these times these hockey players are smart enough, specifically when it comes to these knee-on-knee collisions, that it's not the same as you boarding somebody, right? When you board somebody, there's very little risk to yourself. I mean, the only thing you're really risking is like maybe a compressed shoulder, right?
Or like his skate coming up and hitting you awkwardly.
But like this is just as dangerous for you as it is for the other guy. So I don't think it was
Mm-hmm.
intentional from Hakanpää. And I think that there's a little bit of something to be said for the take a hit to make a play mentality. But some players, look, if you're Connor McDavid, because of your injury history, you're trying to avoid hits as much as possible. But on the other side of that
Oh, of
coin,
course.
you're also fast enough to do that at this point. You're slippery enough to do that at this point in your career. Drew Dowdy being 6'1", 202 at 31 years old, not exactly the fleetest of foot anymore. Not to say he's slow, but he's not 26 anymore.
And for what it's worth, I mean, Drew Dowdy in his prime, like, because he has had a couple injuries over the last couple of years that have slowed him down too. But in his prime, he wasn't necessarily all that fast. He was just more mobile than anything. Like he had more like I guess he was more of an agile skater. Like he was good at creating space for himself. Whereas he was never like he's not like Connor who's slippery in that regard. Like Drew Dowdy at almost no point in his career is slippery enough to like avoid getting hit by Hakanpää almost at all here. So I don't know why you wouldn't just, tuck up and take the hit shoulder to shoulder and just. I mean, we've seen Drew Dowdy lay guys out all the time, so I don't know why he would almost like bail out this time, but
especially considering how close to the boards it was. If he was trying to slip a hit in open ice, you have a lot of room to work with, but even if he starts to slip the hit to the inside a little bit, there's still a chance he's going to catch Hakanpää's shoulder and go into the boards.
Exactly. Like, there's almost no situation here where you're going to avoid some level of contact. And I know, like you said, like, guys with injury histories like Dowdy has had, like, he's not trying to get hit, but at the same time, like, your legs are the biggest factor in Drew Dowdy's decline were the injuries to his groin and his knees. So, like, I don't know why you'd put yourself in a position where, like, your legs would become the principal point of contact. And like you said, it happens fast, right? So he probably just saw Hakanpää coming and went to get out of the way. But it's almost like he probably should have just. I just think he should have stood there and taken it. Like, there's very little chance Hakanpää is going to blow you up there. He's probably just going to rub you out along the boards and you're fine.
Yeah, especially because Hakanpää wasn't really coming with a lot of speed on the hit. He realistically didn't have that much momentum behind him, so. And I don't want anybody to come out here and think that we're blaming Drew Dowdy for his injury. That's not what we're doing. It's a freak thing.
That's more or less what I'm talking about. Like, I'm just talking about like I guess like the serendipity of the whole thing, right? Like, just the unfortunate nature of like if he really would have just taken the hit, he would have been fine. Which sounds like backwards, right? Because you're like, yeah, just take the hit and you'll get up and walk it off. But it's like, you avoid the hit and you end up with a blown up ACL or MCL, whatever it is, because they haven't said, and they're probably not going to. But it looked really bad. Like, he didn't get up. So
I think you have to go into this situation with the mentality of if you're not 100% certain you're going to slip the hit, then you got to take it. And I think that in general, that's a good way to go about playing hockey. Like, if you're not completely positive that you're going to miss this your opponent completely, like no clipping skates, no banging knees, if you're not completely confident that you're going to slip the hit, then just take it, because you're going to put not only yourself but the guy that's throwing the hit in a way more vulnerable position than if you would have just take it. I mean, we saw this the other night. It was a game the Islanders were playing. I forget who it was. Somebody behind the net was trying to. I don't know why they did this. It was Brock Nelson who was coming behind the net to forecheck, right? Brock Nelson's not exactly Matt Martin or Ryan Reeves. You know what I'm saying? He's not gonna kill you. And the player tried to duck, and his head just like collided with Brock Nelson's chest, and it was really scary because it was like you can compress your spine doing that.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really, really awkward. I don't know why he tried. That's it. Like, yeah, but okay. So I guess that's really my thing, right? When these guys try to slip these hits, why do they do it in such a way that puts them in a really awful position every time? Like, they never put themselves in a position where, like, even if they take, like, a glancing blow where they'll just, like, fall down and get up, it's always like they put themselves in a position to get, like, these catastrophic injuries. Like, that guy could have died. You know what I mean? Like, by tucking his head in like that. And, like, he's also lucky, like, when he ducked, the crown of his helmet didn't hit Brock Nelson in the face. Like, there was a whole bunch of things that could have went wrong if instead of him just taking the hit and falling down. Like, you're wearing padding, bro. Like, you're not gonna feel it. It'll be all right.
Even if you slip 90% of a hit and you still take 10%, we shouldn't be playing this zero-sum game that is ducking a hit. You know, ducking a hit is a game of absolute. You either should duck the hit completely. If you're Connor McDavid, you can slip a hit and you can make the guy miss completely, or you should just take it, because the end result more often than not, and obviously, look, it's a thing of confirmation bias. Guys take glancing blows and slip hits partially all throughout the ice. It's just that we see the one time where it goes wrong and we're like, oh God. But when it goes wrong, it goes really, really wrong. I think that's really the thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
sure, maybe 9 times out of 10 when you go to slip the hit, you just glance off the guy and you get to where you got to go. But that one time when you don't, you either end up with like a blown out knee, a concussion, a shoulder to the face on accident because the guy was leaning up your shoulder and for some reason you decide to put your head down. It's
I have another
just,
good example.
Like, not worth it.
Yeah, I remember. So just to build on your Brock Nelson example, it was 2 years ago. Rangers were in the Rock in New Jersey playing. Chris Kreider's coming down. He's not coming in all that fast, but he's got his feet planted, his arms tucked in. He's getting ready to hit this guy, and this guy goes to slip the hit, and he turns at the last second and gives Kreider nothing but his back, and he puts himself and he gets boarded, and so it's like, why? Like, that's my that's only my, like, that's my really my question. It's just like, why do you guys do this to yourselves? Like, nobody wants to get hurt, but then you just end up hurting yourself worse. I don't know. It's very bizarre to me.
It's like, would you rather be sore for the next 2 days, or would you rather have a torn ACL for the next 6 weeks? And
have to have like a surgery of some kind. Yeah, like,
if I pushed you out of an airplane and told you, hey, let's say if I brought you up on an airplane, I said, hey, here's a parachute. There's a 5% chance this isn't gonna work. Or you can stay in the airplane and have a 100% chance of being sore the next day. Would you jump out of the airplane and be like, nah, fucking 5% is not that big of a deal? No, of course not. You're not jumping out of an airplane if I tell you there's a 5% chance your parachute's just not going to open.
Yeah, bro, because that's 5%. That's a 5% chance I'm going to die. Like, no. And I think, yeah, exactly. Like, so when you go to duck a hit, it's like there's a 95% chance you're going to miss it, but there's a 5% chance you're going to just absolutely get ended by this thing. Why take that 5% chance? If you just take the hit, most of the time where we see these hits happen is, like you said, along the boards. It's when guys try to like shuck and jive along the boards and like they can't do it. Not everyone's Pavel Datsyuk or Patrick Kane or Connor McDavid, who's just like, they're just slippery. Sometimes you just got to take a hit. Like,
yeah, for sure. So, obviously we wish Drew Dowdy, well wishes and good health, and hopefully his injury is less severe than it appears to be. But, for all you young kids, anybody that's listening, just take the hit, man. It's not worth that 5% chance that you're going to blow out your knee because, either you miss a game the next day with some soreness or you miss like 6 weeks. It's just not worth it.
Yeah.
And, look, this is also coming from two guys who have never played ice hockey before. So take that for what it's worth. But I think, we make a pretty compelling argument outside of that. You don't have to be a 5-star chef to tell somebody that a meal sucks. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So
I don't have to be a genius to tell you it's a bad idea.
I always hated that argument. Like, you wouldn't know. You didn't play hockey. It's like, I don't know. Are you a Michelin star chef? No? Well, then you can't ever tell me that a meal is bad. Like, it's just a stupid argument. But, I guess, we'll talk about one more topic here before we end up wrapping up. The Montreal Canadiens is starting out 0-5, ultimate insult to injury. Jesperi Kotkaniemi comes home and scores a goal with the Carolina Hurricanes in their win the other day in the Bell Center. It has been going really rough for a team that, I don't think people's expectations were another Stanley Cup final trip after losing Shea Weber, whose career at this point is all but confirmed to be completely over, and losing not really losing Carey Price, but Carey Price not playing on the ice, taking part in the NHL Players Assistance Program, which we hope nothing but the best for him in that scenario. Of course, taking his mental health seriously is always a good thing. But 0-5 to start the year. They have, I believe, I pull up the standings here. Let me just double check so I'm not getting yelled at by somebody who's like, actually, they have 4 goals in 5 games to their 19 goals against. And it's not like they're playing exactly the craziest of teams at the moment. Not to take away anything from the teams they've played, but they've lost to the Maple Leafs, the Sabres, the Rangers, the Sharks, and the Hurricanes. And they have a game tonight. This is being recorded Saturday the 23rd against the Detroit Red Wings at home. So I think you can excuse the loss to the Maple Leafs. You can excuse the loss to the Rangers somewhat and the Hurricanes just based on the caliber of teams those guys are. But a 5-1 loss against the Sabres, not even close. A 5-0 loss against the Sharks.
Again, not even close.
What is going on in Montreal? A team that people thought, again, maybe not a Stanley Cup Finals trip, but 0-5?
Here's the real thing that I think is the biggest problem. 19 goals against. This is a team that was like, if anything, we would have thought would have been pretty solid defensively because that's kind of all they have going for them. They don't have a lot of high-end offense. Their rookies are underperforming. I think they put a lot of pressure on Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield to be game changers, and they've struggled to get going this year. It's going to happen, especially when you're relying on a lot of young pieces like they are. And losing Carey Price like a week before the season starts is hard. But again, you saw if you know anything about hockey or care anything about the sport, you saw Mark Bergevin's comments about it. You saw how much it meant to him that Carey was just getting the help he needed.
And it's not for nothing. It's not like they went into the season with no goalies at all. They still have Jake Allen.
Right, and Jake Allen's been good for them.
He's no Carey Price, but
no,
he's not exactly like some fourth stringer ECHL goalie.
And I don't think he's been the problem this year, honestly. I don't think he's the reason they're losing these games. He hasn't been great. None of the Canadiens have been great. And that's really kind of the problem, is that the whole team is underperforming. It's not just one or two things. It's not like the Rangers right now, where it's like on some nights you can see like one or two things aren't working. But this is the whole team just kind of looks off. And I don't know if it's, losing some players in the offseason, like Philip Deneau, who was their number one center, took a lot of their penalty killing, a lot of their big matchup minutes, and shifting that responsibility onto younger players who might not be necessarily ready or might not be the best equipped to handle that role. Because let's be honest, Nick Suzuki's kind of undersized, not exactly the best matchup guy in the world. It's almost as if they let a guy who was a big defensive centerman and a good matchup center iceman walk away in free agency. Weird.
And then not to mention they lost his replacement as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of that was also such a weird, that was such a bizarre thing, because that was payback for them trying to offer Sebastian Aho.
Yeah.
And it's how long were you planning this revenge, dog? This is a super villain level circuitous scheme. You're and one day they'll have a high draft pick that goes to RFA, and it's okay.
And it was the other weird thing about that was the Hurricanes did not need centers. They have Aho, Jordan Staal,
Martin
Vinny Trocheck's been playing wing for them, but he has played center in the past. it's not like their top six center core was exactly hurting for this position. So that was a very
I mean,
weird,
yeah,
weird situation to me.
it was really like because Carolina, the only position I really feel like Carolina needs to upgrade at is a goaltending. And that, I mean, I think they did by getting Freddie Anderson, which we've talked about before. But, it's not like they were offer sheeting like, I don't know, Andre Vasilevsky or something, where it's like, oh, okay, like I see the vision here. Like they're really going for a big upgrade. It's like you offer sheeted Kakaniemi, signed him to a contract that is way inflated. Like he's not worth $6 million at this point in his career. Maybe one day, but and he's not exactly a different kind of player that they didn't. He's not a player that they didn't have already. They already had guys like like Vinny Trocheck, who's known to be like when he plays center, a hard checking, hard playing, defensive, two-way center iceman,
They also went
which is
out and
exactly
signed Derek Stepan, by the way.
who's again exactly what that point in his career where he's just a hard checking, hard like back checking defensive center. I think that's what they signed these guys for, and they go out and sign a two-way center iceman who's got maybe more offensive upside than either of the other two guys at this point in their careers, but hasn't shown any of it really, and really hasn't shown all that his defensive prowess that everyone's talked about either. You know what I mean? Like Hakaniemi's been pretty lackluster all around since he's come to the NHL. And whether that's because Montreal just felt the need to rush his development like they did with Alex Galchenyuk, we'll never really know. But it just seems that Montreal and their developing of talent over the last decade or so has been really piss poor.
And it's kind of a weird situation for the Hurricanes too, because okay, look, obviously, it's just a 1 year deal. You can sign him again after this the season to a lower deal.
Well, the big problem is though is
But
that
like,
if they want to qualify him.
Well, I think the other big deal is he gonna take less money? They went out and paid $6 million for him. Are you gonna look him in the face and offer him anything less than I think? It's very, very rare that a guy takes less money on his next contract unless the contract before was either massively overinflated for a number of years, or the guy's getting towards the end of his career and he just wants a shot at the cup. It's very rare that a 21-year-old is going to take less money on his next deal. And even if you can round him down maybe to something along the lines of 5.5, is he going to take anything less than 5 after you gave him 6.1?
I mean, I wouldn't. And the biggest problem is even if they want to just qualify him to continue negotiating, when a qualifying offer is $6 million. So if you're Jesperi Kotkaniemi and you're negotiating with the Hurricanes and they're offering you 5 and then they give you a qualifying offer, I'm signing that qualifying offer. That's a guaranteed 1 year at $6 million again. You know what I mean? So like they really just put themselves in a weird spot with this. Like I don't see the vision, especially because they're gonna have to sign guys like Martin Nikish and Andrei Svechnikov to like big long-term deals soon.
Well, Svechnikov's
he's got his
deal.
contract. Yeah.
Specifically, next year, Kotkaniemi comes up, Niederreiter comes up, Trocheck comes up, Stepan comes up. That's negotiable. Martin Nakis comes up. Ian Cole, Ethan Bear, Tony DeAngelo, and Brendan Smith are the names that come up, and they're going to be looking at roughly $23 million in cap space if the cap doesn't go up.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, like, especially if Kotkaniemi doesn't step up and turn into the player they think he can be, so they can let a guy like Trocheck or Derek Stepan walk away, and not have to worry about trying to find somebody else again.
Yeah, it's a very bizarre thing because, like you said, I think that this was the position they needed to improve on the least. I thought if anything else, they're wingers on the second line. Maybe you get an upgrade over a guy like Nino Niederreiter, and then in 2 years from now, so they have this year, next year, and then the year after. That's when Aho's contract comes up, and he's gonna be 27, and boy, howdy, is he gonna get paid. So.
Oh yeah.
And just for the record, just to kind of really quickly, just to kind of toot my own horn for a second, I was right about Peter Mrazek. He is hurt, and they had to emergency sign somebody to an ATO for 2 games before they could call somebody up. So, not to rub it in Toronto fans too much, in their faces too much, but this is what happens when you sign 2 injury-prone goaltenders. Anyway, back to the Canadiens. Yeah, I mean, it's just been rough when you lose essentially your top 2 centers, right? Philip Deneau and Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And it's not like they didn't make additions in the offseason. I actually quite liked some of the additions they made to kind of fill in some of those holes. You know, if you look at the guys they lost, right? Up front, they lost Philip Deneau and Kotkaniemi. They bring in Christian Dvorak, who I think is a pretty solid player. They signed Mike Hoffman, who's looking to kind of, I guess, bring his career back from the dead. I don't know what the hell happened to this guy. Signed Cedric Paquette, who I think is a fantastic third-line player. Matthew Perreault. On the back end, you know, obviously you lose Shea Weber, but then you bring in a guy like Chris Weidman, Sami Niku, Alexander Romanov takes another step, David Savard. I don't think they lost... Like, when you look at their net losses and gains, they definitely net lost on this offseason.
But it's not by much.
It's not 0-5
no
levels of, like, losses. You know what I'm saying?
I realistically thought... I pictured them finishing the season close to 500, you know? Like, 35-ish wins, maybe a little closer to 40, but, like, with the way they're looking, they might be lucky to get 35 wins, you know? Like, it's not looking good up in Montreal right now. Especially because they're not scoring. Like, that offense is, like, absolutely anemic. 4 goals in 5 games. I mean, that's rough.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's rough. And I think the biggest issue facing them is at this point there's not a whole lot of wiggle room. There really isn't. Even in terms of the wild card, I mean, sure, you can argue that there's a little bit of wiggle room for the division because maybe the Bruins aren't quite the team they used to be. Maybe, you know, Tampa Bay's only 2-2, but I don't think that's going to last. I think Tampa Bay's one of the best teams in the league. Obviously, Florida's clearly one of the best teams in the league, so you're not catching Florida, I don't think.
No.
Then you got to worry about Toronto, you got to worry about Boston, you got to worry about Tampa Bay. So I mean, that right there, that's 4 solid hockey clubs that you don't want to be chasing, and B, you don't want to be giving them too much runway ahead of time at the beginning of the season, especially when, let's be honest, in those head-to-head matchups, are you really going to be winning over 500 of those matchups against those 4 clubs combined? That's going to be a hard ask. It's a hard ask for any team.
And you have to combine that with the fact that the Metropolitan Division is probably the most competitive in the league. So now they were realistically only going to be a wild card team anyway. So to have 4 teams in their division already ahead of them, essentially locking one of the wild card spots in, right? You're now fighting all the teams in the Metro and your own division for that last wild card spot, and I just don't think they have it. I just really don't think they're going to have what it takes to take one of those spots from those teams. I thought they'd be closer, but I don't know if they're going to have it.
No, I don't think so. And you know, because the Rangers are looking as good as we thought they'd be. The Capitals are looking pretty good. The Hurricanes looking pretty good. Even the Penguins are surviving currently without
literally their whole team.
You know, teams like the Islanders obviously off to a very slow start, but that's, you know, the sky is blue,
Par for
right?
the course.
Like the sky is blue. You know, the Islanders always get off to a slow start. Even hearkening back to the Jack Capuano days with John Tavares, the Islanders never got out of the gate fast. So they're gonna probably heat up. What? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you see that? And we were talking about the Penguins real quick. That Chris Letang entered COVID protocol today too.
And to make matters even worse, is we thought Crosby would be back by Game 10. Is they just said that they don't have a timetable for him.
So yeah, either his recovery took a setback, or they were over optimistic with where he was going to be. Either way, not exactly a promising outlook for Sid the Kid in Pittsburgh this season. Which is a
No.
shame because, Sid's one of those guys that like you'll love to hate, but I mean, there's nothing more than I'd love to see Sidney Crosby highlights on TV. Much as I hate the guy, like it sucks to see that like his later years are being marred with injuries like this. Because even last year he missed almost half the season with an injury. So
Yeah.
it's sad. It's sad how the mighty have fallen, I guess.
So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some rough stuff going around the NHL. Listen, Montreal Canadiens fans, I'm not saying your season's over. Obviously, we're only 5 games in. Things will equal out. Like, let's not forget. Hey, the Buffalo Sabres are 3-1. The Red Wings are 2-1-1. They currently sit second and third in the Atlantic. That's not gonna last. Like,
Never does.
Buffalo, the last 3 seasons, were the best team in the middle of November, and then what happened? So, uh, obviously early on, but things worth keeping an eye on. Anything you want to talk about last minute before we kind of wrap up here?
No, I don't think so.
All right, so thank you guys for listening. Next week, again, just kind of talking about whatever happens in the NHL. Always something to talk about. Never a dull moment. So I want to thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys again next time.